Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Usman Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna. Welcome to all the devotees online. Thank you very much for your attendance and association as we associate with Srimad Bhagavatam, continuing Canto 1, Chapter 11, verses 30 to 35, Lord Krishna's entrance into Dwarka. Om Jnanatimivantasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Tamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavinebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Sarva Shastra Piyusha Sarva Vaireka Satphala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokai Pritprada Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu Kalidwando Didatitya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O nectar churned from the ocean of all Vedic scriptures, O most prominent transcendental fruit of all the Vedas, O you enriched with the jewels of all spiritual philosophical conclusions, O you who grant spiritual vision to all the people of the world, O light breath of the Vaishnava devotees, O Lord, you are the sun which has risen to dispel the darkness of Kali Yuga. You are Lord Krishna who has returned amongst us. Paramananda Pathaya Prema Varshasha Rayate Sarvada Sarva Sevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namastute. O Srimad Bhagavatam, I offer respectful obeisance unto you. By reading one attains transcendental bliss. For your syllables rain pure love of God upon the reader. You are also to be served by everyone, for you are incarnation of Lord Krishna. Madekabando Mat Sangim Mad Guru Man Mahadana Man Nishtarka Mad Bhagya Madananda Namastute. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O my only friend, O my companion, O my teacher, O my great wealth, O my deliverer, O my good fortune, O my bliss, I offer respectful obeisance unto you. Asadu Sadhu Tadahin Attini Chocha Taraka Anamunchakada Chinmam Premna Ritkatayospura. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O giver of saintliness to the unsaintly, O uplifter very fallen, please do not ever leave me. Please become manifest Mahatma throat, accompany and pure love of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadhyasya Yatonvayaritarata Charte Swabhigna Swara Tene Brahma Hidaya Adikavaye Muyanti Yatsuraya Tejo Vari Mridam Yata Vinimayo Yat Pratir Sargom Nisha Damna Svena Sada Nirastakokam Satyam Param Dhimai. O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primal cause of all causes of creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations and is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by illusory representation of water seen in fire or land seen on water. Only because of him, the material universe is temporarily manifested. By the reactions of the three modes of nature appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from illusory representation of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Prayanalpaisha Sabhya Kalavasmin Yuge Jana Mandasumana Matayo Mandabhagyo Padrita. O learned one, in this iron age of Kali, men are but short lives. They are quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. Narayan Namaskrityam Naracheva Narotamam Devim Saraswatyam Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisance unto the personality of God at Narayan, unto Narayan Visha, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasa, the author. Savai Pumsa Paro Dharmo Yatho Bhaktira Dokshaja Ahitike Paratyata Yatma Suprasidati. The supreme occupation, dharma, for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendental Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Jana Yatyusa Vairagyam Jnanam Yatkam. By rendering devotional service unto the person of God as Shri Krishna, one immediately acquires causes of knowledge and detachment from the world. Vadanti tattat pravidas tattvam yaj gnanam advayam parmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti sabhyate. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma or Bhagavan. Shri Shusho Shradanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syan Mahatsevaya Vipra Punya Tirtha Nishevanat, O twice born sages. By serving those devotees who are completely free from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. Shronatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanam, Redantastoya Badrani Vidunoti Suritsatam. Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is Paramatma, super soul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of a truthful devotee, cleanses desire from material enjoyment from the heart of a devotee, who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtues when properly heard and chanted. Nastaprayashu Bhadreshu Nitam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Sloke Bhakti Bhavati Neshtaki. By regular attendance in the classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We continue Srimad Bhagavatam based on the teachings of Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Hare Krishna. Let us cover some feedback. If you can remember anything from Canto 1, Chapter 11, verses 24 to 29 that we covered, what you found interesting, caught your attention, that you remembered, that you took down, that we need to recap and get some feedback. Hemavati Radhika says, Jiva Goswami describes Krishna's monsoon cloud color, Shyam, is a spiritual color and has ability to extract devotion out of the devotee's heart. Krishna's only interest is loving reciprocation. Krishna doesn't need anything. Just like in a family of wealthy people, if there's a family that's extremely wealthy, they don't need any necessities because they have ample. They don't need any money because they have ample. So materially, they have everything. What they need is loving relationships. If they have all the wealth in the world, but they have no loving reciprocation, then what is the use of that wealth? That becomes a curse. Yet, on the other hand, someone may have no wealth at all. They may be very poor, even struggling to have the bare necessities. But if they have loving reciprocation and relationships, then that loving reciprocation and relationship sustains their life, supports their life and sustains their life, nourishes their life. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he does not lack in any opulences. And therefore, Krishna, he seeks reciprocation, loving devotion. And Krishna's personality is such that it attracts those sincere souls who love him. Everything that Krishna does increases their attraction and attention to Krishna. Madhachana Siddhi says, the Lord appears in the Archa Vigraha form to facilitate our devotional service. We need to take advantage of it as Krishna is the Archa Vigraha. This is Prabhupada's blessing upon us all, that he has installed the deities. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave this instruction to the Goswamis, Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami, that you go to Vrindavan and establish temples. Why? Because they are very, very important. The acharyas, under the direction of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, will not do anything that is not extremely essential and beneficial for the souls in Kali Yuga. Therefore, whatever Srijit Mahaprabhu has instructed and the instructions carried out by the Goswamis, coming down in parampara, that Srila Prabhupada has wonderfully carried out across the globe, these activities should not be taken lightly. Prabhupada would not, if we understand Prabhupada's urgency and emergency when he was on the planet, we can appreciate that Srila Prabhupada did know, Prabhupada, knowing that he had limited time, only gave what was necessary according to the time available. For example, Prabhupada had many, many desires. He wanted to publish many versions of Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada wanted to give Jaiva Dharma, other scriptures of the Goswamis. And he did not have time to give these other scriptures. He did not even have time to roll out the Varnashram system. So we can appreciate that Prabhupada, in the 50% that he did, what he did was extremely essential. We cannot neglect those activities. And one of them was installing the deities. So our lives should be centered around the service of the deities. Mother Sharina says, Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisance and appreciation. I was really touched by the point of how seeing the Lord is a festival. Srila Prabhupada has mercifully given us an opportunity to be able to see the Lord in the temple and offer some service to them. So we must take advantage of this. Yes. That was a very, very profound point. That, and when I was reading that point, it brought me back to the festival of Panihati, for example. We read the festival of Panihati, the punishment festival, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami gives it in such elaborate detail in terms of what transpired, the preparations that were performed, this arrangement, the setting. So much detail is given. So if we host that festival at Sri Shinitai Gauri's temple, Mandir, with Sri Shinitai Gauri there, what Srila Prabhupada is saying, that that festival that we are hosting in the 21st century is non-different. It is non-different from the festival that was held 500 years ago. That is very, very powerful. Or if we hosting Janmashtami and we're celebrating Janmashtami in front of Shishi Vadavadnath or Shishinitai Gohari, that is non-different from the festivals that was held 5,000 years ago. We are there with the Lord. So it's a question of tuning in. The frequencies are all there to access. It all depends on what is the frequency number you want to tune on. Right now, our frequencies are far away from the optimal frequency of connecting with Krishna. And by practice, we can fine-tune that frequency so that when we are with the Lord, celebrating, serving, it is exactly like the Lord is present or when he was present. That opportunity is already available. The Lord is there. Now it is our goal and objective to be present in that frequency. And by practice, we can be able to be present exactly at that point when the Lord is there and experience the reciprocation. So Prabhupada has given us the opportunity. It is not cheap and it is not easy, but it is not impossible. It requires practice. And with good association, with constant reminder, we can bring our consciousness back. Because in Kali Yuga, there are many aspects of areas that distract our attention. So we may be derailed, we may be distracted. We always need to bring our consciousness back to focus on the objective. Just like a parent guiding their child. If the child does something wrong or the child deviates, then the parents, as loving guardians, are there to remind the child, don't do this. This is not good for you. Be careful. So like that, in association, we are reminded. Nalini Kanta Prabhu says, chirping birds is the whispering voice of the Lord. Beautiful nature is the smile of Krishna. So when we see beauty, we should remember Krishna's smile. Prabhupada said, when we see raindrops, large raindrops. Madhuri is showing you a picture of Shishinita Gohari smiling. So when we see raindrops, then we should remember the gopis' teardrops in separation of Krishna. So like that, our consciousness needs to be Krishnatized. Whatever we see, somehow or other, we must link it, we must connect it to Krishna. That is Krishna consciousness. In the spiritual world, every single devotee in the spiritual world never ever forgets Krishna for a moment. Every single moment they are thinking of Krishna. So we need to practice that thinking to be Krishna conscious to enter the spiritual world. Bhavana Prabhu says, Srimad Bhagavatam 1:11-24. To have a look at the Lord is great occasion, undoubtedly. In the temple of the Lord, transcendental form of the Lord is worshipped. It is understatement how much one is grateful of the Acha Vigraha incarnation or Acha incarnation. Knowledge of this has amplified my enthusiasm to visit temple with the objective of seeing the transcendental form of the Lord. It has renewed and enlivened my enthusiasm to visit the temple. Yeah. One time, the devotees, must have been Guru Puja, some Kirtan devotees were there. And then I asked the question, what is the value of going back to the spiritual world? Why? Because you're already in the spiritual world. Prabhupada said the temples are Vaikuntha. There's the spiritual world. So if one comes into the temple, one is in the spiritual world, one is in Navadvip, one is in Goloka Vrindavan. The question is whether you entering Vrindavan or Navadvip, or you coming with the consciousness that you're still in the material world. See, it is a state of consciousness. And if you come in with the proper consciousness, you can enter into the spiritual environment. Prabhupada makes it very clear, if you come to the temple or you're staying in the temple, you are basically in an environment of Sudasattva. Very often we may have the opportunity to visit the temple or even stay in the temple, but we do not take advantage of the environment and we degrade our consciousness. So we in the temple physically, but not consciously. We need to make sure that we're not just physically there, but also conscientiously we are in the temple. It is a similar, we can give a similar example, like when you're chanting japa. You may be physically there with your bead bag, but you are not consciously there with the holy name. When you're serving or when you're honoring prasad, you may be physically there in front of Krishna prasad, but you are not consciously there honoring Krishna's presence. And therefore we find Prabhupada's naming the society, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Are we conscious of Krishna? And how are we going to be conscious of Krishna? We associate with those who are Krishna conscious. And you might say, well, who are those? We find so many personalities there in the Bhagavatam. Right now we are associating with the queens of Dwarka, who are completely Krishna conscious. We are associating with Srila Prabhupada through his Bhaktivedanta purports, who is completely Krishna conscious. So in this way, we find there are so many devotees across the globe in different ways, in different percentages, who are Krishna conscious. We associate, even if a devotee is 5% Krishna conscious, we associate with him and we tap into that 5% of Krishna consciousness. So yes, we should constantly remind ourselves of the good fortune to visit a temple or be in the temple environment. Hemavati Radhika says, amplified respect preserved more elegantly by keeping women and men separately. Beautiful Vedic culture is scientific. And this aspect of shyness, of separation, of respect, these Vedic principles, they are eternal tenets which are there in the Vedas. And over time, as Kali Yuga progresses, these principles become distorted, becomes diluted, becomes diverted, or additional aspects filter in, and we see the ramification, destructive nature of these aspects when we do not maintain what Krishna has given. The attitude of service we must master, being servant of the servant of the servant of the servant. And the lower down, the sweeter it becomes. Yes, Srila Prabhupada shared that pastime. Now we find that the challenge with cultivating and mastering this attitude of, servant of the servant of the servant of the servant is that theoretically it's wonderful, practically is the challenge. And because of our conditioned nature to be the master, even as a servant, or even as trying to be a servant of the servant of the servant, this attitude of master filters in. And it can filter in very, very subtly. Very, very subtly. Like one time when Srila Prabhupada was doing the fire sacrifice and everything wasn't set nicely. So Prabhupada asked, where's the fruit? And they then went to go get fruit. They cut some fruit. They brought some fruit salad. Prabhupada was even more upset. So in this way, the arrangement wasn't made properly, and Prabhupada was getting angry. So one youngster, he he pointed to Srila Prabhupada, why are you getting angry? You should chant Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada, in humility, took his bead bag and started chanting Hare Krishna. We see here the person who told Srila Prabhupada chant Hare Krishna, that nature of being the master, want to instruct, want to control, want to dominate, will always filter through in the material world. Whereas a servant of the servant will accept every situation in a positive spirit, and in fact, more glorious than a positive spirit, even in a more proactive spirit, and never ever indulge on a negative level or with negative thinking. So it requires real Krishna consciousness to stay in that frequency. Bhafana Prabhu says, authorized Acharya emphasis is, who knows the science perfectly, just to offer facilities to common man. Greatest mercy ever for a person in knowledge of his fallen state. The law of satiation, acting on living entities in the material state of attachment, our materially obtained body becomes subjected to birth, growth, transformation, situation, deterioration, annihilation under the laws of nature, unlike the Lord who is described as infallible. Yes, these are powerful statements by Srila Prabhupada. We call it power statements. Prabhupada is able to give the science of Krishna consciousness in amazing sutra form, even in the most non-refined language like English. Mother Les says, all who love Sri Krishna, and even those who get to regularly see Krishna, are never satiated. Krishna's spiritual body is all attractive, all beautiful. We can never get enough. Spiritual life is so special. It grows and grows. Just like the unlimited Lord, Shri Krishna, there is no limit, no satiation to the senses. Everything anchors for Krishna. Wanting to catch a glimpse of Krishna, wanting to hear Krishna, wanting to offer him something, wanting to catch a whiff of his fragrance, get a smiling glance. This seems like a measure that material senses are slowly becoming spiritualized. Yes, wonderful feedback from Mother Lash. We can also use this to see, am I making advancement? Because if I'm making advancement, then my attraction of my senses should be more and more to Krishna, and less to Maya. Am I hankering, like Bhafana Prabhu says, hankering to go to the temple, hankering to chant Hare Krishna, hankering to associate with the devotees, hankering to have kirtan, hankering for Krishna Prasad that everybody likes. So are we becoming more and more attracted spontaneously? I want to do that. It just, a spark just manifests. Oh yes, let's go, let's do this. So in this way, this is healthy. And as it becomes more and more consistent, Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, Srila Prabhupada talks about this in terms of hearing. So initially we may hear drops and it tastes nice, but then these drops become more frequent, and then it becomes even more frequent, and then it drops with consistency, with no breaks in between, and then it drops with thicker consistency. So like that, our attachment to Krishna, we may be getting drops, but that drops need to increase, and then need to go more consistent, so there's no break-in, and then it should become even more and more thicker. This is how the residents of Vrindavan, of Dwarka, experience Krishna. With no breakage, they cannot get enough of Krishna. In the material world, we don't have enough of Maya. We want to come to the stage of not having enough of Krishna. Bhavana Prabhu says, anything and everything can be taken away, but only if I can be left with the bead bag, I'll lack or need or fight, but will be content with a bead bag on my hand touching the beads. Now, Bhavana Prabhu, there may be a challenge that is a wonderful aspiration, but there may be even a challenge with holding the bead bag. You may be in a situation that you may not be able to hold the bead bag. One time His Holiness Giraj Maharaj got up and for some reason he could not move his fingers, his wrist. And the realization that he shared was that there may be a time that you can't even put your hand in the bead bag. You may be bedridden, that you can't even move your hands. In that situation, you don't even need your bead bag. There may be a nuclear war and your bead bag may disintegrate. You do not need your bead bag. Okay, what do I need? All you need is your tongue. But even your tongue could be cut. Even your tongue could not move. You may not have enough energy to even vibrate something. So what do you only need is your mind. And therefore Krishna says, train your mind to think of me. Man mana bhavamat bhakto. He does not say, use your hands to think of me, or use your hands to chant my name. No. Use your tongue to chant my name. No. Use your mind to think of Krishna. Why? Because no material circumstance can stop your mind from thinking. And the more we practice, we start to spiritualize the mind so that even if the mind is drugged, the soul with its spiritual mind will think of Krishna. So therefore, we practice Krishna consciousness starting with our beads, with our tongue, engaging our mind, so that eventually the only sense that we fully depend on is unfortunately our rascal mind. And therefore in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna makes it very clear, we need to train our rascal mind, who's an enemy right now, to become our best friend. And when we train our mind to become our best friend, a best friend means that person who's always there. A friend in need is a friend indeed. So when the mind becomes our best friend, the mind will always be there to encourage us, to coerce us, to think of Krishna. So this should be our goal. When can I make my mind completely absorbed in Krishna? So that now I got a friend who's Krishna conscious. And with his association, I can be Krishna conscious. In this way, I can go back to the spiritual world. Thank you very much for everyone's feedback. Let us proceed to hear about Krishna's reciprocation with the queens of Dwarka. So text 30 to 35 dealing with the queens. 30 to 33, the queens in the palaces rejoicing, embracing him in their hearts, feeling a new experience. 34 to 35, inconceivable pastimes of the Lord. Text 30. Atha vishatsva bhavanam sarvakamam Anuttamam prasadayatra patninam sahasrani chasodasha. Thereafter, the Lord entered his palaces, which were perfect to the fullest extent. His wives lived in them, and they numbered over 16,000. So Krishna had 16,108 palaces. And here we are hearing the description. They were perfect to the fullest extent. It's inconceivable to appreciate and understand a residence that is perfect to the fullest extent. There is no material shortage of opulence, of facility. This is Krishna. Why would Krishna not have a perfect facility? Because he is perfect and he's unlimited in perfection, unlimited in resources. Therefore, he would provide unlimited perfection in even facilities. We can appreciate the contentment of the queens of Vrindavan. They had, the queens of Dwarka, they had absolutely no lack because they had the perfect husband. Lord Krishna had 16,108 wives. And for each and every one of them, there was a fully equipped palace, complete with necessary compounds and gardens. Full description of these palaces is given in the 10th canto. All the palaces were made of the best marble stone. They were illumined by jewels and decorated by curtains and carpets of velvet and silk, nicely bedecked and embroidered with gold lace. The personality of Godhead means one who is full with all power, all energy, all opulences, all beauties, all knowledge, and all renunciation. Therefore, in the palaces of the Lord, there was nothing wanting for fulfilling all desires of the Lord. The Lord is unlimited, and therefore his desires are also unlimited. And the supply is also unlimited. Everything being unlimited. It is concisely described here as samakama, or full with all desirable equipment. So this is Dwarka. This is the opulence of Dwarka. And Krishna, with 16,100 queens, is enjoying these facilities. This is the Aishwarya, the opulent side of Krishna's relationships, Krishna's facility. We have Vrindavan, which has opulence that surpasses Dwarka, but in its simplicity and natural habitat. We have Dwarka, which has opulence surpassing Vaikuntha, as Krishna, as Dwarkadish, as the king. And Krishna enjoys both, being a coward boy without sandals, with a coward stick, flute, and herding the cows, lying on Govardhan Hill, on lush grass, with the gopis who are village ladies. And then we have Krishna in Dwarka as the royal king, the emperor, with all majesty and opulence, with his queens, bedecked with royal garments, and having all facility at his command. This is Krishna. Prabhupada's going to establish and emphasize this point that Krishna, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why? Because he's got 16,108 wives. Most people have a challenge just maintaining one wife, having a wonderful relationship just with one wife in Kali Yuga. Krishna had 16,108 wives, and they all were looked after with unlimited opulences and facility. Only God, only the Supreme Personality of Godhead can do this. Even if somebody says, I'm God, if he tries to maintain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 100, 200, 300, 1,000 wives, it'll be impossible for him to even survive. What talk about that? He can't even be with all of them at the same time. They would be fighting amongst themselves. But Krishna was able to be with every single queen. This means he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 31. Patya patim proshya grinanupagatam vilokya sanjata mano mohotsava utastur arat sahasa sanatsayat sakham vriter vridita lochananana. The queens of Lord Shri Krishna rejoiced within their minds to see their husband home after a long period abroad. The queens got up at once from their seats and meditations, as was socially customary. They covered their faces shyly and looked about coyly. Purport. As mentioned above, the Lord entered his home palaces occupied by the 16,100 queens. This means that the Lord at once expanded himself in as many plenary expansions as they were queens and palaces, and entered each and every one of them simultaneously and separately. Here is another manifestation of the feature of his internal potency. He can expand himself in as many forms of spiritual identity as he desires, even though he is one without a second. It is confirmed by the Shruti mantra that the Absolute is one alone, and yet he becomes many as soon as he so desires. These manifold expansions of the Supreme Lord are manifested as plenary and separated portions. The separated portions are representations of his energy, and the plenary portions are manifestations of his personality. Thus, the personality of Godhead manifested himself in 16,100 plenary expansions and simultaneously entered into each and every one of the palaces of the queens. This is called Vaibhava, or the transcendental potency of the Lord. And because he can do so, he is also known as Yogeshwara. Ordinarily, a yogi or mystic living being is able to expand himself at utmost to tenfold expansions of his body. But the Lord can do so to the extent of as many thousands or infinitely as he likes. Unbelievers become astonished to learn that Lord Krishna married more than 16,000 queens, because they think of Lord Krishna as one of them and measure the potency of the Lord by their own limited potency. One should know, therefore, that the Lord is never on the level of the living beings, who are but expansions of his marginal potency. And one should never equalize the potent and the potency, although there is very little difference of quality between the potent and the potency. So that is Prabhupada's warning. We should never equalize the potent and the potency. We should never equalize, especially the Lord, with the marginal potency. That is extremely destructive. That is spiritual suicide. The living entity who's marginal in nature is never, ever equal to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And here's one practical example. If somebody ever claims to be God, just tell them to marry 16,108 queens, personalities, and maintain each one perfectly with unlimited opulences so that they are all satisfied. And on top of that, expend himself in every palace. One should know, therefore, that the Lord is never on the same level of the living beings who are but expansions of his marginal potency. And one should never equalize the potency and the potent and the potency, although there is very little difference of the quality between the potent and the potency. The queens were all expansions of his eternal potency, and thus the potent and the potencies are perpetually exchanging transcendental pleasures known as the pastime of the Lord. One should not, therefore, become astonished to learn that the Lord married so many wives. On the contrary, one should affirm that even if the Lord married 16,000 million wives, he is not completely manifesting his unlimited and inexhaustible potency. He married only 16,000 wives and entered in each and every one of the different palaces just to impress in the history of the human beings on the surface of the earth that the Lord is never equal to or less than any human being. However wonderful he may be, no one, therefore, is equal to or greater than the Lord. The Lord is always great in all respect. God is great, is the eternal truth. So this is Siddhanta. This is truth. And this truth we need to engrain, etch into our heart so that it's never ever erased. Krishna is the greatest. There will never ever be anyone equal to or greater than Krishna because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In order to convince the people in this creation, Krishna performed these pastimes of marrying 16,108 queens. Those who do not understand or receive this knowledge in disciplic succession, they see Krishna as a perverted personality who's just interested in associating with women. They do not understand and appreciate Krishna's supremacy. Those who are guided by the acharyas like Srila Prabhupada receive the proper understanding. Prabhupada also makes the point that these are Krishna's pastimes with his internal potency. Every aspect of Krishna's creation eternally, in every facet, is nothing but Krishna's expansion and manifestation of his energies interacting in different ways, different permutations to give pleasure to Krishna. If we consider Krishna expanding himself in unlimited forms, Radharani also expands herself in unlimited forms. From Vrindavan to Dwarka to Vaikuntha to the material creation. These are all expansions of Radha and Krishna, the one absolute truth, supreme personality of Godhead. And just as Krishna expands in Vrindavan, Radharani expands in Vrindavan, for example, like the gopis and the gopas. Then Radha and Krishna also expands in Dwarka. So in Dwarka, all the expansions are also internal potencies of Radharani. And all the gopis are expansions of the internal potency in Vrindavan of Srimati Radharani. So for example, Radharani directly expands as Satyabhama as one of the principal queens in Dwarka. Chandravali expands as one of the principal queens, in fact, the main principal queens, Rukmini, in Dwarka. All for exchanging pastimes on different levels, in different features. In Vrindavan, the exchange is of sweetness and unmarried relationships. In Dwarka, it is of opulence and married relationships. In the material world, people enjoy married relationships, and they also enjoy unmarried relationships. These propensities to enjoy married and unmarried exist eternally also in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who enjoys these relationships with his internal potencies, not the marginal potency. So all the gopis, all the residents of Dwarka, they are not conditioned souls like us in the material world. They are all expansions of the internal potency of Krishna. And because they are Krishna's own internal potency, there is absolutely no perverted association, no mundane tinge related to these relationships. Those who see it that way, it is simply the fallen, contaminated, perverted consciousness. Prabhupada continues. Therefore, as soon as the queens saw from a distance their husband, who was far away from home for long periods due to the battle of Kurukshetra, they all arose from their slumber of meditation and prepared to receive their most beloved. According to Yajnavalkya's religious injunctions, a woman whose husband is away from home should not take part in any social functions, should not decorate her body, should not laugh, and should not go to any relative's house in any circumstances. This is the vow of the ladies whose husbands are away from home. At the same time, it is also enjoined that a wife should never present herself before husband in an unclean state. She must decorate herself with ornaments and good dress, and should always be present before husband in a happy and joyous mood. So here we are now being educated on relationship psychology between husband and wife. The Bhagavatam has all facets of education. And here we are getting a glimpse, a very slight glimpse of the psychology between husband and wife. She must decorate herself with ornaments and good dress, and should always be present before her husband in a happy and joyous mood. The queens of Lord Krishna were all in meditation, thinking of the Lord's absence, and they were always meditating upon him. The Lord's devotees cannot live for a moment without meditating on the Lord. And what to speak of the queens, who were all goddesses of fortune incarnated as queens in the pastime of the Lord at Dwarka. They can never be separated from the Lord, either by presence or by trance. The gopis at Vrindavan could not forget the Lord when the Lord was away in the forest cow herding. When the Lord boy Krishna was absent from the village, the gopis at home used to worry about him, traversing the rough ground with his soft lotus feet. By thinking thus, they were sometimes overwhelmed in trance and mortified in their heart. Such is the condition of the pure associates of the Lord. They are always in trance, and so the queens also were in trance during the absence of the Lord. Presently, having seen the Lord from a distance, they at once gave up all their engagement, including the vows of women as described above. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, there was a regular psychological reaction on the occasion. First of all, rising from their seats, although they wanted to see their husband, they were deterred because of feminine shyness. But due to strong ecstasy, they overcame that stage of weakness and became caught up with the idea of embracing the Lord. And this thought factually made them unconscious of their surrounding environment. This prime state of ecstasy annihilated all other formalities and social conventions, and thus they escaped all stumbling blocks on the path of meeting the Lord. And that is the perfect stage of meeting the Lord of the soul, Shri Krishna. Very wonderful and interesting description by Srila Prabhupada. We see how people may not understand and appreciate, for example, shyness. You know, how can a wife be shy of a husband? It does not feature in material relationships. And that's because the culture has been eroded to such an extent. There is so much familiarity. And what to talk about familiarity, in most cases, so much power, control, and hunger for power and control, that there is no question of submission or shyness. These facets do not exist or feature in modern relationships. So here we get a glimpse of a quality of shyness that they had. When they saw the Lord, immediately they were shy and they wanted to see the Lord, but they could not see the Lord because of shyness. So immediately it's like they covered their face, etc. But because of the pure relationship, that initial shyness, which is a wonderful quality, we already read about Prabhupada explaining this is the jewel of the feminine gender, shyness. It's one of the opulences. So as soon as they felt that shyness, which allowed them to hold back and not even see the Lord, even though they wanted to see the Lord, the love that they had, overpowered, the ecstasy overpowered that shyness. So it's not that they broke the norms of relationship. They had shyness, but their love and the ecstasy that they experience overpowered that obstacle of shyness for them to then meet the Lord. And this is how love drives the relationships of the devotees with Krishna. It supersedes rules and regulations. It supersedes the psychological aspect of personalities of male and female, for example. Love becomes the driving force. And that love in different personalities manifests in different ways, which Krishna then reciprocates and enjoys. Because each will react differently, in different proportions, in different intensities, with different flavors. You could say Krishna's unlimited devotees having unlimited loving reciprocations experience unlimited varieties of flavors. This is Krishna. 32. Tam atmajair drishtibir anantaratmanam duranta bhava parire birir patim nirodamapyas nirodya apyashravad an ampu netrayor vilajatinam brigu varya vaiklavat. The insuperable ecstasy was so strong that the queens who were shy first embraced the Lord in the innermost recesses of their hearts. Then they embraced him visually, and then they sent their sons to embrace him, which is equal to personal embracing. But, O chief amongst the Brigus, though they tried to restrain their feelings, they inadvertently shed tears. So now we're getting a deeper glimpse of this loving relationship that even with shyness, their senses all extended to embrace the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who was their lovable husband. Prabhupada in the purport says, although due to feminine shyness, there were many hindrances to embracing the dear husband, Lord Shri Krishna, the queens performed that act by seeing him, by putting him in the cause of their hearts, and by sending their sons to embrace him. So here we see how the shyness is amplifying the intimacy. If that shyness is not there, you would just go and embrace the Lord. But because the shyness is there and you can't just embrace the Lord, but you want to embrace the Lord, you first embrace the Lord with your eyes. Then you embrace him with your heart. Then you embrace him through your children. And then finally you're able to embrace him. So shyness increases intimacy, which from a material perspective seems contradictory. Therefore, in a material perspective, people don't glorify shyness as a wonderful quality. They instead of having the shy and the intimacy, they talk about the bold and the beautiful, right? Here we see how this quality of shyness really amplifies intimacy and gives greater satisfaction. Still, the act remained unfinished, and tears rolled down their cheeks despite all endeavors to check them. This is love. In the material world, we don't see this. Naturally, with the Lord, it's special. And that love is so powerful, so overwhelming, that tears just roll down the cheeks. We see this type of relationship, the sweetness, the depth of these relationships, even in Chaitanya Charitamrita. When Lord Nityananda and Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met for the first time, we can just try to understand these are two eternal brothers, never separated, meeting for the first time. The power, the potency of them meeting is inconceivable. It's electrifying. When they embraced, just when they started seeing each other, it was overwhelming emotions, tears rolling down each other's eyes. Then when they embrace, they fainted in ecstasy. And we read these descriptions so often when devotees in Chaitanya Charitamrita would meet, and just by embracing, they would faint. How deep, how powerful, how potent, how pure must these relationships be to experience such reactions? We meet each other, Haribol, hi, how are you? Okay, that's it. And we go about doing our business. There's no depth. It's very superficial. At least we can have peaceful relationship. In Kali Yuga, that itself is a high glorious goal. But that is not the ultimate. That is not even great. When the relationships become even more pure, beyond the three modes of material nature, beyond I scratch your back, you scratch my back, beyond what I get from you, therefore I'll reciprocate. When it starts to come on a pure Krishna conscious level, then we can begin to appreciate what true relationships is all about, and begin to experience, get a deeper experience of those relationships, which we're getting a glimpse of in these descriptions. One indirectly embraces the husband by sending the son to embrace him, because the son is developed as part of the mother's body. The embrace of the son is not exactly the embrace of the husband and wife from the sexual point of view, but the embrace is satisfaction from the affectionate point of view. Now we have two types of understanding. In the material world, very often the satisfaction of a relationship is based on sex intimacy. And mainly in Kali Yuga, it becomes the predominating motive for relationship. Real spiritual relationships is not based on sexual intimacy, but it's based on the satisfaction derived from loving reciprocation, which for Kali Yuga is beyond comprehension. Like, how can one have loving relationships minus sexual intimacy? They just cannot comprehend, because of the pollution of Kali Yuga. Because consider, the shackles of sex life is what binds people in this material world. And the highest pleasure in material creation is sex pleasure, which is the lowest starting in the spiritual realm. So mundane sex life does not even feature in the spiritual world. The intimacy of the spiritual relationships is beyond gross, mundane sex affair. And we will not be able to appreciate those relationships with a mundane consciousness. Therefore, we simply accept statements of Srila Prabhupada and continue our practice. And we're going to see how Srila Prabhupada takes these aspects, intimate aspects, and then changes the tune as we proceed. The embrace of the I is more effective in the conjugal relationship, in the conjugal relation. And thus, according to Srila Jiva Goswami, there is nothing wrong in such an exchange of feeling between husband and wife. So this is way, way beyond Kali Yuga relationship, embracing with eyes. 33. Yadyapyauso parshwa gatoras raho gatas tatapi tasyangri yugam navam pade pade kavira meta tatpadat chalapi yach chirirna jahati karhichit. Although Lord Shri Krishna was constantly by their sides, as well as exclusively alone, his feet appeared to them to be newer and newer. The goddess of fortune, although by nature always restless and moving, could not quit the Lord's feet. So what woman can be detached from those feet, having once taken shelter of them? Conditioned living beings are always after the favor of the goddess of fortune. Although by nature she is moving from one place to another, in the material world, no one is permanently fortunate, however clever one may be. There have been so many big empires in different parts of the world. There has been so many powerful kings all over the world. And there have been so many fortunate men, but all of them have been liquidated gradually. This is the law of material nature. So now Prabhupada is try to appreciate Srila Prabhupada's perspective. His feet are always on the ground. Here we are talking about the intimacy of the queens of Dwarka with Krishna. And Prabhupada is taking that intimacy in relation to them seeing Krishna's lotus feet as new and cannot leave the shelter of his lotus feet. And Prabhupada is bringing it home, down to earth, to ground level, to where we are, to make the point of liquidation. And what is this law of liquidation? The law of liquidation is that no matter how much fortune, opulence, facility, assets you acquire in this material world, the law of liquidation is that it will gradually diminish and you will lose everything. When we appreciate this law, the desire to accumulate wealth will slowly wane. It's not that we do not need and aspire for wealth. As servants of Shijit Mahaprabhu, as servants of Srila Prabhupada, we want unlimited wealth. But we want unlimited wealth only to offer that wealth in the service of the Lord. Not like the materialists who want unlimited wealth for exploitation and sense gratification. So we do not desire unlimited wealth, knowing that if I spend all my time accumulating that wealth, which eventually will be lost due to the law of liquidation, then what is the use of spending all that time to acquire that wealth? Rather, let me spend that time effectively in the service of the Lord, in the glorification of the Lord. At the same time, praying that if unlimited wealth manifests by the mercy of the Lord, that I can use that unlimited wealth completely in the service of the Lord. This is the law of material nature, but spiritually, it is different. According to Brahma Samhita, the Lord is served very respectfully by hundreds and thousands of goddesses of fortune. They are always in a lonely place, also with the Lord, but still in the association of the Lord, the association of the Lord is so inspiringly newer and newer that they cannot quit the Lord for a moment, even though they are by nature very restless and are moving about. The spiritual relation with the Lord is so enlivening and resourceful that no one can leave the company of the Lord once having taken shelter of him. Let that sink in. The spiritual relation with the Lord is so enlivening and resourceful that no one can leave the company of the Lord once having taken shelter of him. This is why we need to try to increase associating with the Lord. Just like if I take a match and I want to light the match, I strike it on the box and it doesn't spark or it doesn't light. What do? I strike it again and it doesn't light. I strike it again. Each strike is getting me closer to get that match to flame. Similarly, when we associate, or in our conditioned stage, it's always like, when is prasadam time? Or when are they going to finish? Or when can I get home? I got work to do, etc. It's not wrong, but we need to associate more and more and more with the Lord so that one day when you attend a festival, when you are reading the Bhagavatam, when you are chanting Hare Krishna, when you are seeing the deities, when you are honoring prasad, you will not want it to end. At that point, this statement of Srila Prabhupada would have become a reality. The spiritual relation with the Lord is so enlivening and resourceful that no one can leave the company of the Lord once they have taken shelter of him. You would not want it to stop. This means spiritual health. The living beings are by constitution feminine by nature. Male or enjoyer is the Lord, and all manifestations of his different potencies are feminine by nature. In Bhagavad Gita, the living beings are designated as Paraj Prakriti, or superior potency. The material elements are Apara Prakriti, or inferior potency. Such potencies are always employed for the satisfaction of the employer or the enjoyer. The supreme enjoyer is the Lord himself, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 5:29. The potencies, therefore, when engaged directly in the service of the Lord, revive the natural color. And thus, there is no disparity in the relationship of the potent and potency. Right now, we are discolored. When we engage directly in the service of the Lord, we revive our natural color. Prabhupada continues. Generally, people engaged in service are always seeking some post under the government or the supreme enjoyer of the state. Since the Lord is the supreme enjoyer of everything in and outside the universe, it is happiness to be employed by him. Such a wonderful point. Since the Lord is the supreme enjoyer of the world in and outside the universe, it is happiness to be employed by him. Do we feel that happiness when we are serving the Lord? Do we feel that same ecstasy, that same feeling that I do not want to leave, that same enlivening nature, resourcefulness, that I do not want to leave? If I at least get a glimpse or feel little happiness, that's a start. We need to intensify our service. We need to increase our service. We need to increase the purity of that service. So I'm engaging in service, that's glorious. But to what extent do I need to continue and come to so that I can experience these statements that Srila Prabhupada is making? Firstly, I need to increase my service. Then I need to also increase the purity of that service. I need to increase I need to purify the motive of that service. I need to reduce offenses in that service. I need to increase the pleasure that the Lord is deriving from the service. I need to increase Prabhupada's pleasure through that service. I need to perform more and more pure, intense sadhana so that I can offer greater devotional service. The more I do that, this statement, it is happiness to be employed by him, becomes manifested. Once engaged in the supreme governmental service of the Lord, no living being wishes to be relieved from that engagement. The highest perfection of human life is to seek some employment under the Lord's supreme service. That will make one extremely happy. One need not seek the moving goddess of fortune without the relation of the Lord. Such powerful statements by Srila Prabhupada. The highest perfection of human life is to seek some employment under the Lord's supreme service. This is human perfection. And we have that opportunity in abundance by serving Srila Prabhupada, serving Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the supreme personality of Godhead. So we have the Lord's supreme service. Therefore, we should be the most happiest employees on the planet, bar none. We should be so happy serving the Lord that happiness oozes out of every pore of our being, that when others come and they see devotees engage in devotional service, beaming with so much happiness, they want a share of that employment. And when they get that taste, they will realize that that is the best way to get the mercy of the goddess of fortune, instead of seeking the goddess of fortune separately from the Lord. In Mukunda Mala's Stotra 17, King Kulashekar says, "O Master, the personality of Godhead, Narayan, who alone rules the three worlds, whom one can serve in meditation and whom happily shares his personal domain, is manifest before us. Yet, still, we beg for the service of some minor lord of few villages, some lowly men who can only meagerly reward us. Alas, what foolish wretches we are." Here Prabhupada is talking about having employment under the supreme governance of the supreme personality of Godhead. To have God, the supreme personality of Godhead, as your master, to be his servant, is such a glorious position. Krishna can pay you what no person can pay you. Krishna can reward you the bliss and satisfaction that no other employer can give you. Yet, King Kulashekar is saying, we are serving a lot of few villages who are so fallen, so lowly, who gives us such meagerly rewards. And yet, we are so stubbornly attached to serving such people. This is foolishness. Somebody may say, well, where's the alternative? Prabhupada is giving us the alternative in his Bhaktivedanta books. We should be intelligent to understand where does our happiness lie? Where does our fortune lie? Where does our glory lie? It only lies in the employment under the Lord's supreme service, nowhere else. Text 34. Evam nripanam shiti janmanam aksho hinibis parivritta tejasham vidaya veram swasano yathanalam mito vadeno parato nirad yuda. The Lord was specified after killing those kings who were burdensome to the earth. They were puffed up with their military strength, their horses, elephants, chariots, infantry, etc. He himself was not a party in the fight. He simply created hostility between the powerful administrators, and they fought amongst themselves. He was like the wind which causes friction between the bamboos and so sparks a fire. So we were hearing about the gopis. We were hearing about the queens of Dwarka. And now we find you could say, a change in the subject, change in the topic. This is also so that we don't move away from reality, understanding our situation. What do we need to do for us to enter into these pastimes? So Sukadev Goswami, Sutta Goswami, and Srila Prabhupada will always bring us back to earth. That yes, this is wonderful, but this is what you need to do. Purport. As stated above, the living beings are not factual enjoyers of things which are manifested as God's creation. We are not factual enjoyers. We are trying to enjoy the facilities in this world. We are not enjoyers. If we want to enter into the pastimes of Krishna, this is another point we need to ingrain in our consciousness. You are not the factual enjoyer. You are simply the servant, the servant, the servant. And the servant is meant to use everything that he has, that the master has, including himself, for the pleasure of the master. The Lord is the genuine proprietor and the enjoyer of everything manifested in his creation. Unfortunately, influenced by the diluted energy, the living being becomes a false enjoyer under the dictation of the modes of nature. Puffed up by such false sense of becoming God, the deluded living being increases his material strength by so many activities, and thus becomes the burden of the earth. So much so that the earth becomes completely uninhabitable by the same. This state of affair is called dharmasya glani, or misuse of the energy of human being. When such misuse of human energy is prominent, the saner living beings become perturbed by an awkward situation created by the vicious administrators, who are simply burdens on the earth. And the Lord appears by his internal potency just to save the saner section of humanity and to alleviate the burden due to the earthly administrators in different parts of the world. He does not favor either of the unwanted administrators, but by his potential power, he creates hostility between such unwanted administrators, as the air creates fire in the forest by the friction of the bamboos. The fire in the forest takes place automatically by the forces of the air, and similarly the hostility between different groups of politicians takes place by the unseen design of the Lord. The unwanted administrators, puffed up by the false power and military strength, thus become engaged in fighting amongst themselves over ideology conflicts, and so exhaust themselves of all powers. The history of the world reflects this factual will of the Lord, and it will continue to be enacted until living beings are attached to the service of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, this fact is very vividly described. Bhagavad Gita 7:14, it is said, the deluded energy of my potency, and thus, the deluding energy is my potency, and thus it is not possible for the dependent living beings to supersede the strength of the material modes. But those who take shelter in me, the personality of God as Shri Krishna, can cross over the gigantic ocean of material energy. This means that no one can establish peace and prosperity in the world by fruitive activities or by speculative philosophy or ideology. The only way is to surrender unto the Supreme Lord and thus become free from the illusion of the deluding energy. So conflict is arranged by the Lord. And here we see how the description is given that the Lord, in order to bring or protect the sane society, to ensure that Dharma is established, when there's opposing elements of Dharma, Krishna creates the conflict. They fight amongst themselves. They kill themselves. And thus Dharma becomes established. When we perceive the world through the eyes of the Bhagavatam, we see a different picture. Generally, we see so many countries fighting with each other, and we become disturbed. We should not be disturbed. We should see Krishna's hand in creating conflict, like bamboos rubbing each other, creating fire to burn the bamboos. And this type of destructive nature of conflict is there so that they can destroy each other for dharma to be established, for the golden age to be established. We have to appreciate that nothing happens outside the desire of Krishna. Absolutely nothing. We may not see behind the scene, but when we see through the Bhagavatam, when we see through Prabhupada's instructions and purports, we understand that there's a bigger picture that Krishna is unfolding. And we have an opportunity to facilitate, to be part of the solution instead of the problem. If we are part of the problem, we will burn in the friction of the bamboos. But if we are part of the solution, then we will see the necessity of the bamboos being burnt so that I can be prepared to sow the seeds of love of Krishna, of service to the Supreme Personality of God. And Prabhupada is making the point that this cycle will continue eternally. After each age, age after age, universe after universe, it is one of the laws in creation. The history of the world reflects this factual will of the Lord, and it will continue to be enacted until the living beings are attached to the service of the Lord. So this cycle will continue. Conflict, destruction, revival. Conflict, destruction, revival. Until everyone surrenders to the Supreme Lord. So we need to be intelligent to understand that if we do not surrender to the Supreme Lord in service, that same cycle will be in our lives. You will experience conflict in your life. You will experience bamboos having friction, causing fire in your life. You will find destructions in your life. And that cycle will continue until you surrender to the Supreme Lord in service. When you surrender to the Supreme Lord in service, we should understand that as long as the environment you're in is still of an hostile nature, even though you may be interested in the service of the Lord, and your environment will go through that cycle. That is why Prabhupada's vision was to create the whole planet as Vaikuntha, so that there will be no hostile environment against the Supreme Lord. But for the environment to change, we individually who are part of the environment need to change first. If we change, the environment and the way we perceive the environment will automatically change. So let us understand these laws that Prabhupada is revealing in these purports. which will go on eternally. But when we align ourselves to the laws that amplify service, that glorify the Lord, that puts the Lord in the forefront, then we become glorified. We become wonderfully situated. Our natural color manifests. And this is what the Bhagavatam is encouraging us to do. Prabhupada continues, unfortunately, persons who are engaged in a destructive work are unable to surrender to the personality of Godhead. They are all fools of the first order. They are the lowest of human species of life. They are robbed of their knowledge. Although apparently they seem to be academically educated, they are all the demonic mentality, always challenging the supreme power of the Lord. Those who are very materialistic, always hankering for material power and strength, are undoubtedly fools of the first order because they have no information of the living energy, and being ignorant of that supreme spiritual science, they are absorbed in the material science, which ends with the end of the material body. They are the lowest of human beings because the human life is especially meant for reestablishing the lost relationship with the Lord. And they miss this opportunity by being engaged in material activities. They are robbed of their knowledge because even after prolonged speculation, they cannot reach the state of knowing the personality of Godhead, the summum bonum of everything. And all of them are men of demonic principles, and they suffer the consequences, as did such materialistic heroes as Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, Kamsa, and others. So Prabhupada is giving us a warning. Don't be one of these people that Prabhupada is talking about. Very, very clear. In one conversation, one gentleman asked Prabhupada, why do you use the word rascal? Prabhupada said, because it encompasses every perspective of all these statements that Prabhupada mentioned. One word, rascals. So we don't want to be in this category. Susu Medasat, those who have a little more intelligence, they will surrender to the Supreme Lord. We find just like here when Lord Brahma, who had 4 heads, he came to see Krishna in Dwarka, knocked on the door. The guard opened, yes, how can I help you? I like to see the Lord. This is Brahma. The guard went, told Dwarkadis Krishna, Brahma is here to see you. Krishna knew Brahma's mentality. So Krishna said, you go and ask him which Brahma. The guard comes back, says, the Lord wants to know which Brahma are you. And Brahma got upset. What a cheek. What, I mean, how can he ask what does he think? Which Brahma? I'm the only Brahma, 4-headed Brahma. I'm like the power of the universe. The most intelligent person. I got 4 heads. So he was very puffed up. Says, okay, tell him 4-headed Brahma. So went in. Oh, Krishna, 4-headed Brahmas. Said, okay, bring him in. As soon as the Brahma came in with his 4 heads, he saw around him Brahmas with 10 heads bowing down to Krishna, 100 heads, 1,000 heads, 1,000,000 heads, 10 million heads, 1,000,000,000 heads. It is described that Brahma with 4 heads became like small insect in front of all these huge Brahmas with billions of heads. He realized his mistake. He was puffed up with his position. So Krishna taught him a lesson. Like that, if we do not learn our lesson, the material nature will keep teaching us. The sooner we realize our foolishness, the sooner we accept our mistake, the less problems we will experience. Now, here's the interesting point or part, is that we've gone on this path of deviation for so long and we're still in a mess. Prabhupada told his only Bhakti Choromaj, just give this one life to Krishna and see what happens. You wasted so many lifetimes. So wasting one more life is not going to mean much to you anyway. So why don't you just take this one life, which you're going to waste anyway, and try, inverted commas, wasting it for Krishna and see what happens. And if you just offer it to Krishna, you will never regret. Why? Because it is the absolute truth, which we need to accept. So let us not fall in this category of foolishness. 35. Sa esha nara lokesmin avartirna swamayaya reme stri ratna kutashto Bhagavan prakarto yatha. That Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, out of his causeless mercy, appeared on this planet by his eternal potency and enjoyed himself amongst competent women, as if he were engaging in mundane affairs. So it looks material, it's not material. Why? Because Krishna is never material. Krishna is always transcendental. And anything that Krishna relates, associates with, is transcendental, including the queens of Dwarka. The Lord married and lived like a householder. This is certainly like a mundane affair. But when we learn that he married 16,108 wives and lived with them separately in each and every palace, certainly it is not mundane. Therefore, the Lord living as a householder amongst his competent wives is never mundane, and his behavior with them is never to be understood as mundane sex relation. The women who became the wives of the Lord are certainly not ordinary women, because to get the Lord as one's husband is the result of many, many millions of births of tapasya and austerity. When the Lord appears on the different lokas or planets, or on the planets of human beings, he displays his transcendental pastimes just to attract the conditioned soul to become his eternal servitors, friends, parents, and lovers respectively in the transcendental world. And the world where the Lord eternally reciprocates such exchanges of service. Service is pervertedly represented in the material world and broken out untimely, resulting in sad experience. The illusioned living being, conditioned by material nature, cannot understand our ignorance that all our relations here in the mundane world are temporary and full of inebriaties. Such relations cannot help us be happy perpetually. But if the same relations is established with the Lord, then we are transferred to the transcendental world of leaving this material body and become eternally related with him in the relation we desire. The women amongst whom he lived as their husband are not, therefore, women of this mundane world. They are eternally related with him as transcendental wives, a position which they have attained by perfection of devotional service. That is their competency. The Lord is Param Brahman, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Conditioned souls seek after perpetual happiness in all places, not only on this earth, but also on other planets throughout the universe, because constitutionally a spiritual spark, as he is, can travel to any part of God's creation. But being conditioned by the material modes, he tries to travel in space by spacecraft, and so fails to reach his destination. The law of gravitation is binding upon him like the shackles of a prisoner. By other processes, he can reach anywhere, but even if he reaches the highest planet, he cannot attain that perpetual happiness for which he is searching life after life. I'll read its statement again, because Prabhupada is revealing to us what are we all looking for. by the processes, by other processes, he can reach anywhere. And even if he reaches the highest planet, he cannot attain that perpetual happiness for which he is searching for life after life. We are looking for perpetual happiness. When he comes to his senses, however, he seeks after Brahman happiness, knowing it for certain that unlimited happiness which he is seeking is never attainable in the material world. As such, the Supreme Being, Para Brahman, certainly does not seek his happiness anywhere in the material world. So Prabhupada is emphasizing Krishna's position and establishing his position by giving an example of us. We're seeking for permanent happiness, perpetual happiness. It cannot be found in this material world. So why would that Supreme Personality of Godhead come to the material world to experience mundane relationships? It is not possible. Nor can his paraphernalia of happiness be found in the material world. He is not impersonal because he's the leader and Supreme Being amongst innumerable living beings. He cannot be impersonal. He's exactly like us, and he has all the propensities of an individual living being in fullness. He marries exactly like us, but his marriage is neither mundane nor limited by our experience in the conditioned state. His wives, therefore, appear like mundane women, but factually, they're all transcendental, liberated souls, perfect manifestation of internal energy. Grantarat Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Queens of Dwarka ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Go Pramanande Hari Hari. So next week we will continue with Canto 1, Chapter 11, verses 36 to 39. That will conclude this beautiful chapter, and we will move on to the next glorious chapter. Are there any questions or comments anyone has? Please type in the chat. Just give a few more minutes. Hemavati Radhika says, such a beautiful class. Thank you very much, Prabhu. We're so grateful. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you for your feedback. All glories to Srila Prabhupada for giving us these amazing, lucid, vivid Bhaktivedanta purports. A beacon of light guiding us through Kali Yuga and all the ignorance that is there. It is only a question of, are we going to accept? The sooner, the better. It'll save us so much trouble. Just consider, why would Srila Prabhupada go through all this effort to give us this knowledge? Stay up all night if it was not the truth. Prabhupada would not go through all this trouble. The fact that he went through all this trouble itself should give us the reality and the fact that it's the truth. So we simply have to accept this truth and perfect our lives. All right, thank you very much for everyone's attendance. Thank you very much. Madhachana City says, Hare Krishna, thank you for enlivening us. Mother Les says, Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for Krishna. Today was such an awesome and spiritual potent class. There is so much wrapped. There is so much to wrap our minds around. Powerful messages to absorb and try to live by. Thanks. Jagannath Priyapu says, Hare Krishna, thank you for today's class. Thank you very much for everyone's attendance and constant association with the Bhagavatam. We pray that these words of Srila Prabhupada from the Bhagavatam can really enter into our heart and create a spiritual revolution so that we can apply these instructions, perfect them, and actually enter into these pastimes and help Srila Prabhupada share this knowledge to everyone. Jagannath Tirtha Prabhu says, Hare Krishna Prabhu, was the other residents of Dwarka able to see Krishna's 16,108 expansions? Good question. I'm aware of the description given. So the family members always felt Krishna is with us. And there's a description that when Krishna leaves all the 16,108 palaces, they combine, and then they go to his main kingdom, where, or what do you call it, where as the king of Dwarka, he's got his assembly. So the 16,100 come into one Krishna and go to the assembly, and that's one Krishna. And when Narad Muni wanted to see Krishna in Dwarka, when he appears in Dwarka, he appears at the assembly, and there's Krishna. Dwarka is Krishna as one person. So Krishna finishes his ministerial management work service, and now he's ready to go home to the palaces. So Krishna leaves the throne, starts to get onto his chariot, and the chariots all expand 16,108 times to go to different palaces. When Narad Muni sees that, he expands and then goes to each of the palaces to see Krishna doing a service, different service in each palace. So whether all the Dwarka Vasis noticed that Krishna expanded, I cannot say, but we know that there was one Krishna that everybody saw, and then when Krishna expanded, the palace that he goes in, they seeing Krishna is coming to us, and they're obviously not interested in everyone else or the other palaces. So yeah, we can possibly research a little more and see if the other Dwarka Vasis peeped into one palace and peeped into another palace, and so, oh, there's Krishna also, there's Krishna, interesting. And they wouldn't necessarily be surprised, because again, they knew this is Dwarkadish Krishna. They are pure devotees, right? So they wouldn't be surprised. Oh yeah, Krishna can do that. Krishna can expand. Krishna can do anything. He is Krishna. So even if they knew that Krishna was expanded 6,108 times, it wouldn't come to us. It wouldn't be surprise them. Oh, really? How is that possible? No. It would just amplify their love for Krishna. How wonderful our Krishna is. It would have been no surprise at all. Yeah. So that's my response in that. But it'll be interesting to see if there's further descriptions given in terms of whether the rest of the Dwarka Vasis experience multiple or saw multiple Krishnas, because Krishna can do that, just like in the Rasa dance. In the Rasa dance, all the gopis only saw one Krishna. That Krishna was with them. They didn't see all the other Krishnas, even though Krishna expanded with each of the gopis. So Krishna is able to do that. If he wants them to see, they'll see. If he doesn't want them to see, they'll not see. And either way, they will be happy, satisfied, and in bliss. Thank you very much. We will meet all of you next week. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Kwantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Go Pramanande, Hari Hari Bo.